Hey, welcome back, guys. So, as a Tesla shareholder, I frequently get asked if I'm worried about all of these so-called Tesla killers that are either already in the market or that are coming very soon, like over the next year or so, mostly from ICE vehicle manufacturers, but in terms of like hurting Tesla's sales and potentially even putting them out of business in the future. Well, up to this point, none of them have even come close to threatening Tesla's business because as purely an electric vehicle manufacturer that also develops autonomous driving systems, Tesla has benefited from a first mover's advantage and everyone else has really struggled to catch up with them on either price, performance, technology, or all three. But in today's video, I want to take a closer look at the more current so-called Tesla killers and see how they stack up against Tesla and if I think that they will be like a major threat to their business. Should be a fun one though, and I hope you guys enjoy this, and if you do, please consider hitting the like button. It's a great way of supporting the channel for free and it really means a lot to me. Now by now it should be pretty obvious to you and everyone else that Tesla has completely shifted their main focus away from just selling higher priced EVs that are not really attainable by the average consumer in favor of much more affordable but yet still high performance electric vehicles for the mass market, like the Model 3 sedan, the Model Y crossover SUV, and the new kind of crazy looking Cybertruck. And here's just a quick chart that I created to show you how Model 3 deliveries have completely overtaken the Model S and the Model X as Tesla's main business going forward. So that's where we'll be focusing our attention, because if you're going to really hurt Tesla's sales, you got to go after those mass market vehicles. So that's the ones that we'll be comparing. And just to save some time, I'll just tell you right now that none of these competitors even come close in terms of autonomous driving functionalities, so I won't bother reminding you every time that we go through like the list, but just kind of keep that in mind that that is another advantage that Tesla holds over the competition, and it's a very big advantage. Now there is actually an advantage on the competitor side that I also won't be going into, and that's federal tax credits, and that is a big benefit for a lot of the new competitors, but it's also a temporary one. And a lot of these companies have different time frames in terms of how long they can still use them. So to kind of keep things simple, we'll just stick with the standard MSRP since that's really what matters going into like the future over the long term. Okay, but with all that said, let's go ahead and start by just taking a really quick look at the Model 3, the Model Y, and the Cybertruck, and then we'll compare them to the current competition that is in the market right now. And then after that, we'll take a look at the competition that is coming in the near future over the next year or so. Okay, now I made this table here to show you prices and performance for the 3, the Y, and the Cybertruck, and you can pause the video if you want to look through it, but we'll just refer back to it later as we go through the competition and make comparisons. But I'll just quickly mention now that all three vehicles essentially start for only around $40,000, which is pretty cheap for what you get, and all carry at least 250 miles of range as well, except for the cheapest version Model Y that only comes with 230 miles of range. But keep in mind that Tesla has made huge investments into new battery technologies and research and development that over the years will likely increase these ranges significantly, but for now we'll just kind of stick with these since this is what this is the information that we just kind of have right now. Okay, let's start things off with the two more expensive so-called Tesla killers, known as the Audi e-tron and the Jaguar iPace, both of which are already on the market. But starting with Audi, this is their new electric crossover SUV, and at first glance, it's a very attractive looking vehicle, and considering that crossover SUVs are by far the best-selling vehicles in the entire world, this looks like an attractive option. But then you get into the details, 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds. That's okay, I guess. It's basically what you get in the slowest and cheapest versions of Tesla, so for that speed, they better have a low price. Well, not so much. The Audi starts at almost $75,000 and still only has a range of about 200 miles. Granted, for the price, it may be a good alternative to the Model X, I guess, but comparing it to Tesla's cheaper offerings, it doesn't even come close. The base Model 3 starts for close to half the price and has about 50 miles of more range and still comes in at a faster 0 to 60 acceleration speed, while the Model Y also starts for about half the price and still has more range and close to the same acceleration. Again, I don't know if maybe some people don't want a Model X, maybe they can think about the Audi, but it's definitely very very far from being a Tesla killer. Okay, next up we've got the Jaguar I-Pace, which is another SUV, and this one does actually look like a fighter. It's been winning a ton of awards: the World Car of the Year award, World Car Design, World Green Car, European Car of the Year by Car Advice, Best New Car Award by Auto Trader. Okay, I see you, Jaguar. 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. That's not bad. That's not bad. And it costs $70,000 with only 234 miles of range. Yeah, this is not a Tesla killer either. Okay, hold on though, maybe we're taking a look at the wrong vehicles. Sure, these luxury ones have decent performance even though their range and prices are pretty bad, but maybe that's the problem. Maybe we should take a look at the cheaper EVs in the market. Those are sure to give Tesla a challenge, right? Well, the two that I always hear the most about are the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf. Now, the Chevy Volt starts at around $36,000, so it's cheaper than both the base Model 3 and the Model Y, and at 259 miles, it also has slightly better range to go along with it. So even though the 0 to 60 time is a bit slower at 6.5 seconds, its general specs are pretty good and at least comparable to that of Tesla's. But that's of course ignoring other things like aesthetics, overall driving performance and handling, autonomous functionalities, charging network, sound system, and as dumb as this might sound, the overall cool factor of owning a Tesla versus owning a Chevy Bolt or Nissan Leaf, which I've honestly never seen anyone refer to the Bolt or Leaf as being really cool or exciting to own. But speaking about the Leaf, they start at only $30,000, and that's very attractive as it's about $10,000 cheaper than the Model 3. Although this is clearly one of those very common instances where you absolutely get what you pay for, as it only has range of 150 miles and a 0 to 60 time of 7.5 seconds, so it's noticeably slower and has very little range. Now, if you pay about $6.5 thousand more, you can get the Plus version, and that one increases the range to 226 miles, but at that price and range, it's probably better to just pay a little more and actually have a much better car in the Model 3. Still, the Chevy Bolt is really the one that stands out to me as a little bit more of a decent alternative to Tesla's Model 3, and I can almost understand why some people like to refer to these cheaper EVs as a threat, but there's only one problem with that claim. Almost nobody wants to buy either one of these. If we look at sales through the first 3 quarters of 2019, the Tesla Model 3 alone has pretty much outsold all other EVs in America combined. And if we look at the Bolt and the Leaf, the Model 3 sold more than 8.5 times as many Chevy Bolts and over 12 times as many Nissan Leafs. In fact, the Chevy Bolt couldn't even outsell the older Model X, while the Leaf couldn't even outsell the Model S either, and those are two niche market luxury vehicles that cost an insanely higher amount of money. And while we're on here, I might as well add that the Audi e-tron and the Jaguar I-Pace are not even close to the Model 3 either. And keep in mind that crossover SUVs are by far the largest selling vehicle segment in America at about 40%, which is even more if you include all types of SUVs, but the small and mid-sized car segments are in 3rd and 4th positions each, with only around 10% market share respectively. So just think about how crazy this chart would look if the Tesla Model Y was already out in the market and people could actually buy an affordable Tesla SUV. In other words, there's really no competition for Tesla in the market right now, despite us hearing for years that these cars were going to be major threats and possibly even ruin Tesla as a company. But is there something coming in the near future that can actually be a threat? Well, as of right now, there's really 3 vehicles that I've seen like the media and a lot of people just kind of hype up and talk a lot about, and those are the Porsche Taycan sedan, the Mustang crossover SUV from Ford, and the pickup truck and SUV from Rivian. So let's see if those can put up a better fight, and then right after we'll also take a look at some bonus vehicles as well from a ridiculous article that I have to just kind of disprove before we finish the video. Okay, well, let's just get the Porsche Taycan out of the way right now, since it starts at over $100,000, can go up to over $180,000, and still only has range of about 200 miles. So that's definitely not a Tesla killer. Anyone who says that it is either out of their mind or is only referring to the Model S, which again, we proved earlier in the video that Tesla's business is not reliant on those more expensive vehicles anymore. But when looking at Ford though, the 2021 Mach E, which is a Mustang crossover, does actually look like it can put up a fight, as it starts for only about $44,000, which is not too much more than the base Model 3 and Model Y. Now, as far as performance goes, in my opinion, it's a little shady how they advertise it, because they show you the range at 230 miles for the rear wheel drive model, but they also list the 0 to 60 speed in the 5-second range, which is for the all-wheel drive model. So obviously you would not get both of those specs. They're showing you specs for two different versions, and they're just showing you the best specs, but you wouldn't get both of those. I actually had to click through a couple of links to find that the all-wheel drive model costs $2,700 more, making the Mach E even more expensive than it already is, and the range actually drops to 210 miles. So now you'd be paying considerably more money than a Tesla and actually getting less range with probably still about the same 0 to 60 speed. And even if you decide to stick with the rear wheel drive, you're still getting base range of 230 miles with a slower 0 to 60 speed in the 6-second range, which is not any better than the base Model Y. Now granted, the price can be considerably cheaper with the federal tax credit, but that's only in the short term, and while you can get a more expensive version to improve those weaker specs, the price can jump up to over $60,000, and it's probably even more when you add certain features. And at that point, if you're going to spend so much money, it might be worth it to just get a Tesla with much better performance and specs and range, and also have added autonomous driving features, which is something that Ford doesn't offer, and your Tesla would be much more of like a future-proof vehicle. Not to mention that this is the first time that Ford is making an electric vehicle, so you pretty much have to pray that it doesn't break down on you, which Fords are pretty notorious for not having the best quality. Granted, Teslas have been known to have some issues here and there as well, but you can't argue that they are much more experienced in building electric vehicles than Ford. In fact, I was watching this hilarious video on YouTube where they called like 15 different dealerships, and almost all of them were like completely clueless to what the Mach E even is, and some of the salesmen had to look it up on the computer while they were still on the phone, and they tried to like sell a different vehicle because they didn't even know what the Mach E was. So that just doesn't really leave me with a lot of confidence in Ford. And all of this is ignoring the fact that Ford's ICE vehicle sales are already declining heavily, and I'm not sure how a new EV that will likely not be profitable for them at the start is going to help their ICE vehicle sales without instead cannibalizing them. Don't get me wrong, I like the fact that Ford is trying to enter the EV market, and I applaud their efforts. And with the stock tanking by over 36% in the past 5 years, I think the shift to EVs is a necessary one. And in my opinion, the Mach E is the first non-Tesla mass market, like cheaper electric vehicle that actually looks attractive to me and is also pretty competitive on both price and performance. But is it a Tesla killer? My answer is no. They have too many issues that will take time to solve before we can talk about them significantly hurting Tesla's sales. Now, the other company that I've seen a lot of people get very excited about is Rivian, who also happens to be sort of backed by Amazon, which is kind of a big deal. So let's take a look now at their offerings and see how they compare to that of Tesla's. Okay, now they're going to be offering both an SUV called the R1S and a pickup truck called the R1T, both of which I believe will begin production in late 2020 and likely release sometime in 2021 unless they experience any delays. Now, they both start at around $70,000, which right away eliminates them as a true mass market competitor in my opinion, but to be fair to them, they do offer exceptional performance of up to 400 plus miles and 0 to 60 speeds at around 3 seconds with quad motor drivetrains. However, I'm not exactly sure if any of these specs will cost more money because, for example, they list the price as starting at around $70,000, and then with the range, they list it as saying up to 400 plus miles, which makes me think that the base prices may actually have lower specs, but I can't really confirm that because their website is really lacking in any specific details about different pricing tiers and what you would get in return with each. In any case, even if you bought the most expensive Cybertruck, you'd be at about the same price and probably much cheaper considering that the Rivians are just starting prices, and with the Cybertruck you actually get better towing, range, and acceleration. And even with the Model Y, you do give up some performance, but you can also pay tens of thousands of dollars less depending on the version that you get. So look, I'm a fan of Rivian and I think it's freaking awesome what they're doing, even though I'm personally not a fan of their aesthetics. I don't really think their vehicles look very attractive to me, but that's just my personal opinion. But to me, they seem much more like niche market vehicles targeted towards people with bigger wallets rather than the mass market. And again, I know I keep coming back to this, but autonomous driving, if you're going to pay such huge prices, why not just go all out with a Tesla and pay a little extra and get those autonomous driving features and future-proof your vehicle for the longer term? So at the end of the day, I just really don't see any of these companies really being a major threat to Tesla as far as significantly hurting their sales. But just to finish up here, we gotta take a quick look at this like ridiculous article that tries to say that Tesla is in trouble from future electric vehicles. So let's just quickly disprove it and then we'll kind of finish up the video with my overall thoughts. So this article from the Motley Fool, who I'm actually a fan of as they normally write some pretty good articles, but this one just gave me a headache. The author says, "Why rivals ramp up spells trouble for Tesla." And then in the subheading, she writes, "Newer, cheaper EVs that are just as cool as Teslas arrive in the US in mass 2020. Tesla should worry." And then if we scroll down, she writes competition from all sides, and she mentions both cheaper and more expensive EVs as being a major threat. And so she says that high-end luxury EVs like Mercedes, Porsche, and even Aston Martin, which sells for over $200,000, are, quote, serious threats. This is so stupid to me, guys. Trust me, Tesla could not care less about any of these expensive EVs that barely anyone is going to buy. Again, we talked about this before. Tesla is moving to a mass market type of a vehicle company. They don't care about these more expensive EVs. Now, to be fair, I think she meant to focus more on the cheaper EVs as a bigger threat. And here she cites the Mini Cooper and Ford Bronco Scout at under $30,000 price tags and says that the Volvo Polestar will eat away at the Model 3 market. And if that were true, then I agree that would be a big problem for Tesla. But starting with the Mini, that thing has about 100 miles of range and does 0 to 60 in about 7 seconds with no autonomous functionality. So while I admit that the price does look really good at about $30,000, I'm not convinced that it can steal very much of Model 3 sales, as it seems like a pretty weak alternative, to be honest. Next, she mentions the Ford Bronco, and I had to dig through like 10 different websites just to find any information on this thing, and none of it was on Ford's own website, so I'm not sure how accurate any of this is, but Car and Driver listed it as a hybrid, not as a full EV, and they didn't say anything about price or even range either. And everywhere else I looked, I found like little rumors here and there about it, but nothing about pricing. So I'm not sure where she heard that it's going to cost less than $30,000, as she does not list a source. And the only fully electric one that I actually found was this sort of passion project from Zero Labs that has less than 200 miles of range and costs up to $300,000. So again, without a source, I can't really comment on this one. You guys can let me know if you know more about it, but I'm just not, I don't know, I'm not very knowledgeable about this one that she's talking about. And finally, she mentions the Volvo Polestar as something that will eat away at the Model 3 market. And to be fair, this one does actually look like a very attractive sedan that is aimed to release sometime in 2020, but the launch models are going to cost $63,000 according to Kelley Blue Book. And if we compare that version to the long-range Model 3, Tesla costs close to $15,000 less and still beats it on range, acceleration, and also the charge rate. So again, it is a nice looking vehicle, but it's not going to overtake the Model 3. I don't think it's even going to come close in my opinion. Now I'll just finish up here by saying that there's obviously going to be more electric vehicles flooding into the market in the future, and some of them will likely be serious competitors, like for example an electrified version of the Ford F-150 pickup truck, which has been the best-selling vehicle in America for literally decades. But we don't really have enough information to make those fair comparisons right now, so I'll have to make updated videos in the future, so make sure you're subscribed for that content. But overall, I'm just not really seeing anything out there that Tesla really needs to panic over. I think it's all manageable competition, and at the end of the day, I think the best audience for these so-called Tesla killers is probably people who just don't want to own a Tesla themselves. And that's fine if you're just not a fan of Tesla as a company or their vehicles. Maybe you've had a bad experience. Maybe you want something a little more unique like an Audi or a Jaguar, or maybe you want something a little cheaper like I guess a Mini Cooper. There are little kind of scenarios where I could see people opting for these other alternatives to a Tesla, but I think overall, on average, in the EV market, Tesla still stands out as the best option, and it'll probably remain that way for some time. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with my overall thesis, or did you disagree with any of the points that I made in today's video? And if there are any corrections, hey, I'm not perfect. If I messed up on anything, please let me know down in the comments section. I'd be more than happy to read that and respond to as many comments as I can. But thanks again for watching. It really means a lot to me. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting the like button. It really helps a lot. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.